Hey everyone, John here with a look at all 4 Gears of War titles running on Xbox One. So the original Gears was released all the way back in 2006, and it was Epic Games' first full release on Unreal Engine 3. For the time, it was a real graphical powerhouse that pushed what we knew about real-time visuals at the time to the absolute limits. Gears did have some competition released earlier in the year. Ubisoft released Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter, I believe, all the way back in March. And Capcom's demo of Lost Planet that was released during E3 on the Xbox Live Marketplace was also quite a showpiece. But really, Gears of War 1 was the game that really showed us what Xbox 360 could do. So it's interesting seeing this original showpiece running in its native form on Xbox One all these years later. So as impressive as the game was on Xbox 360, it definitely did not run perfectly, and these problems still exist on Xbox One. That being said, we actually found the performance was improved over the original experience on the 360 itself. Obviously, screen tearing has been eliminated since that's forced through the emulation process now, but also many of the other sequences, such as when you're wandering through the rainy factory at night, tended to slow down a little bit on the 360, and that's really not a problem any longer on Xbox One. You can get all the way through there, perfect 30 frames per second. It feels great. But as you have seen in this video, there are definitely moments when that does not hold true and we see drops into the mid-20s. Overall, the game actually plays better on Xbox One than it does on real 360 hardware, which is not something that can be said for many of the games on this list. And now we're on to Gears of War 2. Gears of War 2 first hit the market in 2008, and it was with this game that the franchise really took off. It was a massive improvement over the original in many ways, both in terms of gameplay and technology. During its development, Epic Games continued to work on and refine the Unreal Engine 3, which was growing to become a very popular choice at this time, and with Gears of War 2, they brought a whole host of new improvements to the table. You had things like the improved fluid simulation, which enabled interactive water. So if you unload a full magazine into a river, for instance, you actually see the water ripple and react to each bullet as it hits the surface. We also found that the lighting was improved significantly and ambient occlusion was implemented, something that had been pioneered in 2007 with the original Crysis. Of course, they also added a soft body physics engine into the mix, which enables the legendary cube of meat that was shown in early tech demos.
We've also incorporated Aegea's soft body physics simulation tool, which enables us to simulate objects that are realistically elastic and fluidy, like you see with this cube of meat we built here.
It's still kind of a shame that cube of meat never actually made its way into the game itself, but it was pretty cool. Beyond that, some of the issues with the original game have been cleaned up in this sequel. You might remember from this time that a lot of early Unreal Engine 3 games, including the original Gears and titles such as Mass Effect, really struggled with texture pop-in. When the camera would cut to a new scene or a new level would load, you'd often be presented with a face full of blurry textures for several seconds until the game could finish loading the higher res assets. Well, Gears of War 2 made some pretty nice improvements to this, both in terms of the way the textures are drawn in, using more of a fade effect, and also in terms of the speed at which those textures could be drawn in. What's really impressive about Gears 2 is that it looks better overall, and it also runs better on original hardware. Which leaves us with the question then, how does it fare on Xbox One? So when capturing this video, we wanted to put some of the more demanding scenes to the test, which is why you're seeing moments of slowdown in this video. But really, the general experience is actually a pretty stable 30 frames per second. We really had to spend some time searching for these moments where the performance doesn't quite hold steady. Thanks to the cloud save features, it was easy to pull up our old Gears of War 2 save and jump around between all of the chapters, which helped us find these moments. Here's one example of one of the more challenging sequences in the game in terms of performance. When you rush into this scene, you can see other Gears across the way, and you're positioned here up on this balcony, and you're working on taking out enemies down below in the street. The frame rate really doesn't hold very steady during this section, with lots of the low 20s popping up. In fact, this particular scene actually runs rather similarly to Gears of War 3 and Gears Judgement on Xbox One, which is not exactly a good thing here. But really, this is about the worst case scenario that we encountered, and the majority of the game comes much closer to holding a steady 30 frames per second, with no tearing of course. Ultimately, despite sections like this, Gears 2 is actually very good on Xbox One. It's a really great place to replay the game, and it stays very playable, through most of the game at least. Just keep in mind that there are a few sections like this that don't hold up quite as well.
The Academy had been destroyed by Karn, but the beacon in Professor Elliot's lab would allow
Next up we have the black sheep in the Gears family, Gears of War Judgement. Gears Judgement is the most recent release in the franchise, and also the most unique. Unlike the first 3 games, Judgement was developed by the Polish development house People Can Fly. This studio has a pretty rich history with Epic Games, having aided in the development of Gears of War 2, while also porting the original Gears of War to the PC. In 2011, People Can Fly also released the amazing Bulletstorm, which is one of my personal favorite shooters of the last generation actually. Its next game would go on to become Gears of War Judgement, and during development, Epic Games fully acquired the studio, something that would last for only 3 years before being split off again. Thankfully this time they've acquired the Bulletstorm license, so hopefully we'll see a sequel there. But Gears of War Judgement itself is a pretty interesting game. It has a very different structure than the previous titles, focused more on flashback sequences, which follows Baird and his crew as they retell the sequence of events that led to their arrest. In practice, the game played out more like a series of horde mode matches rather than the more traditional structure seen in the previous games. But it was pretty neat, even if not everyone was fond of it. It was also designed using the most mature version of Unreal Engine 3. It sports some very remarkable visuals, perhaps some of the best looking on Xbox 360, period. The lighting and the design of the world is just tremendous. So on Xbox 360 itself, the game actually runs pretty consistently, with certain sections dropping VSync under load, but in general you're getting a fairly stable 30 frames per second on there. As you can see from this video, however, Xbox One does not fare as well. In fact, of the 4 games in this franchise, Gears Judgement is the one that I might label borderline unplayable. It's really focused on a series of large battles with huge numbers of enemies, and plenty of AI companions all around you. Just the sort of thing that the virtualized CPU threads seem to struggle with. This means plenty of slowdown throughout the experience, with nearly every battle in the game suffering from drops under 30 frames per second and often into the 20s. These performance issues really serve to drag the whole experience down, and it makes it difficult to enjoy the game on Xbox One today. While Gears of War 1 and 2 are very playable, and Gears 3 is moderately playable, Gears Judgement is the one that I just can't recommend playing on Xbox One. This is a bit of a shame as well, because it's also the one Gears game that many fans of the series may have actually missed. It was released right at the end of the 360's life, and with the change in developer and the slightly different style of campaign, mixed with not so positive review scores, the game didn't really sell anywhere near as well as the previous games in the series. So if you're hungry for more Gears and you're still waiting for Gears of War 4, I really do recommend giving this one a shot. You'll probably want to stick with an original 360, however. Well, that wraps up Gears of War Judgement. Be sure to check out the other videos on the site and read the full article while you're at it. Alright, let's shore up this video with some Gears of War 3. Many fans would consider Gears 3 the pinnacle of this franchise, and well, we'd have to agree with them. It's a sharp looking game with a huge amount of variety, plenty of great set pieces, and some very cool battles within. When it comes to visuals, the addition of the baked light mask global illumination solution here makes a world of difference here and helps deliver a game that nearly feels like a generational leap over the previous 2 titles. When running on original Xbox 360 hardware, Gears 3 turns in generally smooth performance, with a few dips popping up during particularly busy scenes. This generally manifests itself as torn frames due to the adaptive VSync, but by and large, the experience feels pretty solid all around. When played on Xbox One, however, the story isn't quite the same, and we see extended drops below the 30 frames per second line during busy combat sequences. In comparison to Gears Judgement, however, the combat scenarios are often less on the busy side, which helps keep the frame rate from buckling too often. Performance dips really are quite mixed here, with many scenes running at or near full speed, while others come crashing down into the low 20s. It is not optimal by any means, but it's still quite playable. Cutscenes all tend to run even better on Xbox One as well, which is a nice bonus. Now when we look at Horde mode in Gears of War 3, however, we actually find performance more in line with Gears of War Judgement, and it can be downright difficult to play as you get to higher levels. The first 5 or so waves are pretty stable, but once you get beyond that and the larger enemies start coming out in greater numbers, then you really start to run into problems. It's possibly a safe bet that many of the people still playing Gears of War 3 are doing so on Xbox 360s, so if you're playing on an Xbox One, you can expect to be at a disadvantage here. Ultimately, looking back over all 4 games in the series, it's pretty clear that performance becomes more of an issue with each new installment. The first 2 games are generally highly playable on Xbox One, while Gears of War 3 is, well, a mixed bag. Now, Gears of War Judgement, this is not where it needs to be just yet, and it's really difficult to enjoy the game on Xbox One due to the fact that every battle that we played through ran under 30 frames per second. Anyways, that wraps up this video for now, but if you enjoyed it and would like to see more, be sure to check out the rest of our content over on YouTube. And until next time, this is John, signing off.